From the tragic ashes left by World War II, a unique theological idea emerged, one that shakes our understanding of God to its core. This was The Theology of the Pain of God by Kazuo Kitamori, born in Japan. From the unfeeling God to the grieving God. When you picture God, what image comes to mind? Perhaps a perfect, omnipotent being, transcendent and far removed from human emotion. For centuries, Western theology, under the influence of Greek philosophy, defined God as theos, apathes, an unfeeling God. For them, perfection meant incapable of change and incapable of suffering. But what if that God could suffer? What if pain was in fact God's very essence? This provocative question, which directly challenges a foundational premise of centuries of theology, is where our story begins. In the 1940s, amid the raw wounds of war, the theologian Kazuo Kitamori raised this question against the grand theological tradition. For him, God's suffering was not a weakness to be hidden. It was the exact opposite. He declared that the pain of God was the very burning heart of the Christian faith. God's inner conflict, the triptych of pain. Why then, and over what, does God feel pain? Kitamori explains this divine suffering through his unique concept of the three orders of love. The first order, direct love, law and wrath. This is a pure, natural love. It is the love of a father for an obedient son, the love of God for a worthy object. But when humanity sins and betrays this love, this holy love necessarily transforms into divine wrath. This is the justice of the law. The second order, the pain of God, the heart of the gospel. The gospel begins here. God resolves to love the very sinner who deserves that wrath. God loves the object of his wrath. This, Kitamori asserts, is the essence of the gospel. God's heart becomes a battlefield where blazing wrath, or justice, and love, or mercy, collide head-on. From this immense internal conflict, a third thing is born, the pain of God. The third order, love based on pain, salvation and resurrection. This pain is not a mere emotion, but God's act to save. The event where this pain was pushed to its absolute limit is the cross. To save the sinner, God endures the pain of surrendering his own beloved Son to that very wrath. Only when sin is conquered through this pain, the cross, can true salvation, the resurrection, be achieved. This is the love based on pain. The roots of this idea can be traced, surprisingly, to the reformer Martin Luther. Reflecting on the cross, Luther declared that God contends with God. This reveals the fierce conflict within the divine. Kitamori grasped this very insight from Luther and systematized it into his unique theology of God's pain. A new pronunciation of an old word, the biblical basis for pain. Kitamori argues that this radical idea is not his own creation. Rather, he claims it is a new pronunciation of an old word, a truth that was always hidden in the Bible but had been overlooked by Western theologians. The key verse he presents as evidence is Jeremiah 31:20. Therefore my bowels are troubled for him. I will surely have mercy upon him. The original Hebrew phrase, for my bowels are troubled, signifies a violent, visceral, gut-wrenching agony. Kitamori criticizes Western theology for domesticating this rough expression into mere pity or longing, thereby missing the intense pain of God contained within it. The Bible, he insists, was speaking of a God in pain, from the very beginning.
The resonance of Tsurimi and its shadow. While this theology shocked the Western theological world, Japanese society was electrified. It was enough to create a Kitamori boom. How could a book of theology become a bestseller and society at large? Kitamori found the reason in Japan's unique native emotion, Tsurimi. This is not simple sadness. It is a bitter, heart-wrenching grief, a pain born from tragic injustice or a fate one cannot control. He found the archetype of this emotion in classic Japanese kabuki tragedies, such as Terakoya, the Temple School, and Kumagai Jinya, Kumagai's Battle Camp. The core plot of these tragedies is shocking. It is the migawari, or substitution play, where a loyal retainer, to save his master's child, a higher value, substitutes his own child to be sacrificed and must hide his grief. The gut-wrenching pain of the parent in this moment is Tsurimi. Kitamori argued that this structure, the pain of a father sacrificing his own child, resonated profoundly with the pain of God in sacrificing his own son for the sake of humanity. However, this profound resonance casts a complex shadow. Critically viewed, the book, written against the backdrop of war, is astonishingly silent on the matter of Japan's perpetrator responsibility. The explosive popularity of the book in post-war Japan may be because this theology perfectly matched the dominant victim mentality of the time. For the Japanese public, who saw themselves as victims of the war and the atomic bombs, Kitamori's theology of pain served as a gospel that soothed their national Tsurimi, but it also allowed them to avoid confronting their sin as perpetrators. This ambiguity led to mixed reactions abroad. While Jürgen Moltmann praised it as a revolution in the concept of God, essential for understanding suffering after Auschwitz, Karl Barth famously criticized it as too Japanese, questioning its universal applicability. From sympathy to responsibility. What then is the final message all this complex theology leaves for us? Above all, the theology of the pain of God is a revolutionary work that transforms our view of suffering. Our pain is no longer proof of God's absence. Where is God? On the contrary, our pain becomes the most vivid evidence, a symbol of presence that God is right here with us, suffering alongside us. But the story does not end there. If our pain merely stops at receiving comfort, it risks remaining stuck in the very victim mentality that limited Kitamori's original context. A true theology of pain must begin with sympathy, weeping with those who weep, but it must inevitably advance to the place of responsibility by asking, why did this suffering happen? To theologically comfort the pain of the sufferer while ignoring the perpetrator who caused it and the unjust structure that allowed it is to offer an empty salvation. If God is truly suffering alongside us, then that divine pain must also include the pain of seeing injustice go unanswered. To move beyond mere sympathy and demand responsibility for the causes of suffering, that is the true and most difficult path of participating in the pain of God.
Please consider subscribing and supporting Logos Community in our mission to spread the gospel. Thank you.